Mother's Day arrived quietly that year, the kind of Sunday morning that didn't announce itself with noise, only with light. Soft Texas sunlight slipped through the thin curtains of my small living room, landing on the old wooden table where I had set a single vase of daisies. I had picked them myself from the edge of the yard, their white petals slightly uneven, honest in a way expensive roses never are. I was wearing my faded blue apron, the one I always wore when I wanted to feel useful. The apple pie had just come out of the oven, its scent warm and familiar, filling the house with a comfort that reminded me of years when this place was loud with laughter. Back then, Mother's Day meant a handmade card from a little boy with crooked handwriting and flour smudged on his fingers. Now that boy was 38 and a millionaire. When David's car pulled into the driveway, I wiped my hands and felt my heart lift despite myself. No matter how old a child gets, a mother still recognizes the sound of their arrival. He stepped inside, holding a bouquet, bright, elegant, clearly chosen by someone else. His suit was crisp, his watch expensive, his face handsome but tired, like a man who lived inside meetings and numbers. "Happy Mother's Day, Mom," he said, leaning down to kiss my cheek. I smiled, taking the flowers. "You didn't have to bring anything." He smiled back, polite, affectionate, but distant. There was a pause as he looked around the room, his eyes passing over the worn sofa, the old photographs on the wall, the same ones that had hung there for decades. Then he said it, casually, as if he were asking about the weather. "Mom, my wife still gives you the $5,000 every month, right? I just want to make sure you're comfortable." The room went still. For a second, I thought I'd misheard him. The words floated between us, unreal, sharp. $5,000, every month. My fingers tightened around the stems of the bouquet. My heart began to pound, not loudly, but insistently, like a warning knock from inside my chest. $5,000? I repeated softly. David nodded, already halfway to reassuring himself. "Yeah, Clara handles it. She makes sure you get it every month." I felt the blood drain from my face. 8 months. 8 months of counting coins at the grocery store. 8 months of canned soup from the church pantry. 8 months of telling myself that pride was heavier than hunger. "The church has been helping me," I said quietly. My voice trembled despite my effort to keep it steady. "I've been managing." David's smile vanished. He stared at me, confusion flickering into concern. "What do you mean, managing?" Before I could answer, the click of heels announced her presence. Clara entered the room like she belonged in a different world. Silk dress, pearl-colored, hugging her perfectly. Shiny heels that never touched dirt. Her perfume reached me before her smile did. Expensive, heavy, completely out of place among apple pie and old furniture. "Oh, Mother," she said brightly, stepping closer. "Happy Mother's Day." Her smile was flawless. Her eyes were not. David turned to her immediately. "Clara, you've been bringing Mom the money every month, right? I've been transferring it to you." She didn't hesitate, not even a second. "Of course," she said smoothly. "I come by every month. Maybe Mother just forgot." Forgot. The word landed gently but crushed all the same. I looked at her calmly. 67 years old, gray hair, soft hands. To people like Clara, that meant one thing: unreliable. "If you brought it," I said, barely above a whisper, "then it must have gotten lost somewhere." Silence filled the room. The wall clock ticked loudly, marking each second as if it wanted to be heard. Outside, a car passed. Inside, my son looked from his glamorous wife to his mother in an apron, his brow creasing. "Clara," he said slowly, "you have been bringing it, right?" She tilted her head. Sympathetic. Practiced. "David, you know how memory works at this age. I've done my part." I nodded. Not because I agreed, but because some battles are not meant to be fought immediately. They are meant to be watched. David placed a hand on my shoulder. "Mom, it's probably just a misunderstanding. I'll check everything. I just want you to be okay." I smiled faintly. Inside me, something shifted. A quiet awareness. A line crossed. After they left, the house felt larger and emptier. Sunlight spread across the table, where the pie sat untouched. I sat down slowly and did the math without paper. $5,000 a month, 8 months, $40,000. That money could have fixed my leaking roof, replaced my broken refrigerator, bought peace instead of worry. Instead, I had thanked God for donated bread and prayed for strength. That night, I opened my old notebook, the one I used for grocery lists and prayers. On a clean page, I wrote only 2 lines. Find the truth. Do not trust fake kindness. I closed the notebook gently. Clara had smiled too easily. And if she believed I was just an old woman who would stay quiet, she had made a terrible mistake. That night, sleep refused to come. I lay in my narrow bed listening to the familiar sounds of the house, the tick of the old clock in the hallway, the distant hum of cars on the road, the soft creak of wood settling under the weight of years. Every sound felt louder than usual, as if the house itself were listening with me. $5,000. The number repeated in my mind until it lost meaning and became a weight instead. I pressed a hand against my chest, not in anger, but in disbelief. I had buried my husband 10 years ago. I had learned how to be alone, how to stretch a dollar, how to accept help without losing myself. But betrayal from inside your own family, that was a lesson I had never prepared for. Before sunrise, I got out of bed. The kitchen was cold. I made myself a cup of weak tea and sat at the table with my old accounting ledger, the one I had kept since my days as treasurer for the Women's Committee at St. Mary's. Its cover was worn, the pages yellowed, but every number inside it was neat and precise. Numbers don't forget. They don't flatter. And they don't lie. I turned the pages slowly. $12. Blood pressure medication. $24. Utilities. $10. Community dinners at church. Each expense carefully written, month after month. There was no sudden jump, no mysterious deposit, no trace of $5,000 ever. By mid-morning, I had made my decision. I put on my cardigan, tied my hair back, and walked to First Texas Community Bank, the same one I'd used for decades. The teller was a young woman named Molly, her smile polite, her eyes kind. "How can I help you today, Mrs. Hayes?" "I need to check something," I said, sliding my passbook across the counter. "Please see if there have been any transfers from my son, David Hayes. He says he's been sending money to me every month." She typed quietly, her fingers quick. Then she stopped. Her expression softened. "I'm sorry," she said gently. "There haven't been any transfers. The only activity here is a small interest payment back in February. No transfers, no mistakes." I nodded, thanked her, and stepped outside. The Texas wind lifted my gray hair as I stood on the sidewalk, the truth settling heavily but clearly in my chest. For 8 months, I had lived smaller than I needed to, while someone else lived larger in my name. When I got home, I didn't cry. I opened my notebook again and began to write, not emotions, not accusations, but facts, dates, times, words. Thursday, June 14th. Clara stopped by with a cake, said the money had already been sent. Saturday, July 12th, Clara called, said she was too busy to visit. Restaurant music in the background. Line by line, I wrote it all down, calmly, carefully, the way I had once balanced company accounts, knowing that truth reveals itself to those patient enough to collect it. Weeks passed, and Clara continued her visits. Always perfect, always smiling, always empty-handed. One afternoon in August, I was watering the garden when her white Mercedes pulled into the driveway. She stepped out radiant, holding lavender like a peace offering. "I brought you flowers," she said sweetly. "Stress isn't good for the memory." I set the watering can down and looked at her. "My memory is fine, Clara. Fine enough to remember that you've never brought me the money." Her smile flickered just for a moment. "The bank must be at fault," she said quickly. "Already checked," I replied. She left early that day. That evening, I wrote one more line in my notebook. She knows that I know. And with that realization, something inside me changed. I was no longer waiting. I was preparing. The truth was out there, and I intended to bring it home quietly, carefully, and completely. The truth didn't arrive all at once. It came the way it always does, slowly, through people who still believe in doing what's right. 3 mornings after Clara rushed out of my garden, there was a knock at my door. Not the casual tap of a neighbor, not the hesitant knock of the mailman. This one was firm, deliberate. I opened the door to a man in a charcoal suit, travel-worn but neat, his hair streaked with gray. He held a leather briefcase and wore the careful expression of someone who didn't enjoy what he was about to say. "Mrs. Margaret Hayes?" he asked. "Yes, my name is Bennett. I'm the chief accountant at Hayes & Partners, your son's company." My heart tightened, but my face remained calm. Please, come in. We sat at the kitchen table, where my husband and I once planned holidays and worried about mortgage payments. Bennett opened his briefcase and placed a thick folder between us. The paper inside was crisp, official, heavy with meaning. I was made aware of your call to our accounting department, he said carefully. And after reviewing certain transactions, I felt it was my responsibility to speak to you directly. He slid the first document toward me. 8 transfers, each one for exactly $5,000. Dates perfectly aligned, month after month, like clockwork. $40,000, he said quietly. Transferred from your son's account. I swallowed. To me? He hesitated. To an account opened under your name, he said, but not controlled by you. My fingers trembled slightly as I turned the page. Recipient, Clara Hayes. The room felt suddenly smaller, warmer, harder to breathe. She opened the account herself, Bennett continued, using documentation signed by your son. I suspect he didn't read it closely. He trusted her. Of course he did. And there's more, Bennett added. He placed down additional papers. Credit card statements, spa bills, jewelry purchases, first-class flights, a down payment on a new Lexus. She's been using the company's secondary credit card for personal expenses, he said. Over $30,000 in 3 months. I stared at the numbers. Not because I didn't understand them, but because I did. For 8 months, Clara had used my name like a mask. A mother's name, a widow's name, to take what wasn't hers. Does David know? I asked softly. Bennett shook his head. I don't believe so. He's brilliant with technology, terrible with trust. Silence settled between us. Finally, I looked up. If I choose to expose this, will you help me? Bennett met my eyes without flinching. Yes, but we must be careful. Clara will deny everything. She'll turn the story if we let her. I nodded slowly. Then we won't let her. After he left, I locked the documents away in a small metal box beneath the cabinet. The click of the key sounded final, like the last door of blind trust closing. That evening, I opened my notebook and wrote, September 11th, 8 transfers, $40,000. Recipient, Clara Hayes. Lies confirmed. I have an ally. I didn't feel anger. I felt clarity. Clara thought elegance could erase numbers. She forgot I spent 40 years listening to what numbers say, and soon, they would speak for me. Once you know the truth, you stop rushing. That was the first lesson my husband ever taught me when we balanced our first checkbook together. If you're right, he used to say, time will prove it for you. Don't hurry and ruin your own case. So I waited. I called David 2 days later, keeping my voice light, motherly, unthreatening. I told him I missed him, that it had been too long since we shared a proper meal, that I wanted to cook his favorite dishes, just like when he was a boy. He sounded relieved. Happy, even. Clara agreed immediately. I spent all Sunday morning preparing not to impress, but to create comfort. Honey-roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, apple walnut salad, and the same apple pie I had baked on Mother's Day. The table was set with my late husband's old silverware, the kind Clara always complimented but never used. Everything needed to feel normal. When they arrived, Clara looked flawless as ever. Soft waves in her hair, a pale silk dress, a smile that suggested nothing in the world was wrong. David followed behind her, tired but warm, carrying flowers. Dinner unfolded gently. Laughter, small talk, stories about work, neighbors, weather. Clara relaxed. I could see it in the way she leaned back in her chair, the way her shoulders loosened. That's when I spoke. I truly appreciate this month's $5,000, I said casually. It helped more than you know. Clara didn't hesitate. Of course, Mother. I'm just doing what I should. I nodded, smiling. Out of curiosity, what day do you usually send it? The 10th, she replied instantly. David frowned. No, honey. I set it for the 15th. That's when payroll clears. Silence fell across the table. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Clara laughed lightly. Too lightly. Oh well, I must have mixed it up. I set my fork down gently. No problem at all, I said. I'll go to the bank on the 15th, just to be safe. David nodded slowly, his eyes no longer relaxed. Clara barely touched her dessert. When they left, I stood in the doorway watching the taillights disappear. Inside me, there was no excitement, only certainty. That night, I wrote 2 emails, one to Bennett, one to Amelia Rowe, an old college friend who now specialized in financial fraud. Subject line: "It's time." By the time I closed my notebook, the trap was already set, and Clara, still smiling, had no idea she had just stepped inside it. The days leading up to the 15th passed quietly, too quietly. Clara didn't visit. She didn't call. No flowers, no perfume drifting through my doorway. That silence told me more than words ever could. When people lie for long enough, they eventually become afraid of the truth catching its breath. On the morning of the 15th, I woke before dawn. I made tea, sat at the table, and waited until the bank opened. When I returned home, I didn't carry answers, I carried confirmation. Everything Bennett had warned me about was real. The account under my name was not mine. The money never touched my hands. I didn't confront David. Not yet. Instead, I called Reverend Cole and asked him for a small favor. A charity discussion. An evening gathering. Nothing formal, just a reason for everyone to be in the same room, under the soft excuse of doing something good. He agreed without questions. That Sunday evening, my house filled again. David arrived first, relaxed, unaware. Clara followed, composed but tense, her smile just a little too tight. She noticed the large beige envelope placed neatly at the center of the table. "What's this?" she asked lightly. "Donation documents," I replied. Something close to my heart. Reverend Cole joined us shortly after, offering a warm prayer before dinner. The room felt calm, ordinary, safe enough for someone who believed she was still in control. When we finished eating, I reached for the envelope. "David," I said gently, "you've always told me honesty matters to you. I thought tonight would be a good time to talk about it." I slid the first paper across the table. He looked down, then froze. "Recipient: Clara Hayes." He read aloud, his voice hollow. "Amount: $5,000. Clara laughed nervously. "That must be a banking error. Names get mixed up all the time." I nodded and placed another paper down. Then another. "Spa bills, travel receipts, a Lexus invoice. That's a lot of errors," I said quietly. Before Clara could speak again, the door opened. Bennett stepped inside. "I prepared those records," he said calmly. "And they are accurate." David stood abruptly. "Clara, what is this?" Her face drained of color. Tears came fast. "Practiced. I was going to give it back. I didn't want your mother to worry." "You stole from her," David said, his voice breaking. "From my mother." Clara grabbed her purse and fled without another word. When the door slammed shut, the house fell silent. I didn't feel victorious. I felt free. Justice does not rush. It waits for proof. 2 days after that night, Amelia called me early in the morning. Her voice was calm, professional, the way it always was when emotions needed to stay outside the room. "Margaret, everything Bennett gathered is solid. Bank confirmations, forged authorizations, transaction histories. This qualifies as elder financial exploitation under Texas law." I closed my eyes briefly. I had known this moment would come, yet hearing the words made my chest tighten. "What happens next?" I asked. "That depends on you," she replied. "We can file criminal charges, civil recovery, or both. But I need to ask, are you prepared for what this will do to your son?" That was the question that mattered. I didn't answer right away. "I don't want revenge," I said finally. "I want the truth to be undeniable." For David, Amelia was silent for a moment. Then she said softly, "Then we proceed carefully. I'll file the case, but we'll let the evidence speak louder than accusations." The hearing was scheduled for the following Monday. That weekend passed in a blur of quiet hours and long thoughts. David didn't call. I didn't blame him. Betrayal has a way of emptying people before it fills them with understanding. On the morning of the hearing, the sky was gray, heavy with rain. Amelia met me outside the courthouse, her coat buttoned neatly, her expression steady. "You ready?" she asked. I nodded. "As I'll ever be." Inside, the courtroom smelled faintly of paper and old wood. Clara was already there, dressed in black, hair pulled back, her face pale but composed. She didn't look at me. David sat behind her, alone, his shoulders slumped, his eyes hollow. When the judge entered, the room fell silent. Amelia stood and laid out the facts with precision. 8 months, 8 transfers, $40,000, a fraudulent account opened under my name, company credit cards used for personal luxury. Clara's attorney tried to redirect the blame. Mrs. Hayes is elderly, he said. There may have been confusion or forgetfulness. My stomach tightened, but Amelia didn't flinch. She placed my brown leather notebook on the table. This journal contains detailed records of every visit, every conversation, every claim the defendant made, Amelia said. Dates, times, exact words, all of which align perfectly with the bank's transaction history. The judge flipped through a few pages, then looked up sharply. Bennett was called to testify. His voice was steady, factual, impossible to dismiss. The account was controlled entirely by Mrs. Clara Hayes, he said. Mrs. Margaret Hayes never had access. Clara lowered her head. Her hands trembled. When the ruling came, it was firm and final. Full restitution of $40,000. Removal of Clara's access to David's finances. Mandatory financial rehabilitation. The gavel struck. The sound echoed longer than I expected. Clara broke down then, sobbing, reaching toward David. He didn't move. He didn't look at her. He just stared at the table, as if trying to understand how love had turned into numbers on a page. As we left the courtroom, rain poured heavily outside. I stood under the awning, letting the sound wash over me. I had won. And yet, my heart felt strangely heavy because justice restores balance, but it also takes something with it. After the ruling, the world went quiet. Not the peaceful kind of quiet, the hollow kind, where sounds still exist, but no one speaks. Days passed, then weeks. The restitution arrived one morning in a plain bank notification. $40,000. Deposited successfully. I stared at the screen longer than I expected. I thought I would feel relief, triumph, vindication. But what I felt instead was emptiness, like standing in a house after a storm has torn the roof away. The damage was fixed, but something familiar was gone. I used part of the money to repair what age had slowly taken from my home: the leaking roof, the broken heater, the curtains that no longer kept the cold out. The rest sat untouched. It didn't feel like mine yet. David didn't call. I understood why. Sometimes a son needs silence the way a wound needs air. One afternoon at St. Mary's, Reverend Cole and I sat in the parish office, sunlight filtering through the narrow window. I told him what had been weighing on me. I don't want this money to end with me, I said. I survived. Many others don't. That was how the Grace Hands Foundation was born. A small beginning. 3 desks in the church basement. An old printer. A hand-painted sign that read, "Helping the forgotten find their voice again." Elderly women tricked by their children. Men whose pensions vanished through forged signatures. Widows who were told they were confused when they asked where their money went. I listened to them the way I once wished someone had listened to me. Months later, on a stormy night, there was a knock at my door. Soft, uncertain. I opened it and found David standing there, soaked, exhausted, broken in a way money could never fix. He dropped to his knees before I could speak. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said, his voice cracking. "I didn't protect you." I knelt beside him, placed my hand on his shoulder, and felt the truth settle gently between us. "Get up, son," I said. "The truth didn't destroy you. It woke you." He began volunteering at the foundation the very next weekend, quietly, humbly, carrying chairs, sorting files, listening more than speaking. I watched my son become someone new, not richer, not louder, but better. 1 year later, I stood at a podium in a simple blue dress as the city honored my work. Applause filled the room, but I looked only at David, standing in the crowd with tears in his eyes. When I spoke, I didn't talk about money. I talked about trust, about how silence protects lies, but truth protects people. That night, back home, I lit a candle beside an old family photo. My husband, my son, me. 3 lives shaped by one simple belief. That dignity is not something you're given. It's something you defend. And if you're listening to this now, wherever you are, remember this. Even when betrayal comes from the people closest to you, the truth will always find its way home.